So this is the second part 2, timed at 14:50 hours GMT on Monday, the 24th of October, 2022, of the Baby Angel Geronimo editions of Khoodeelaar television channel, being broadcast only on the internet, not on satellite, not on terrestrial, not on cable platforms. This is the afternoon in the UK, when the most hectic activities are taking place around the entry into officially designated residence and address of the UK Prime Minister. The entry is going to be made by Rishi Sunak. Sunak is British born but of Indian origin. So, for that reason, the Indian newspapers and the media are doing over hyper activities, overdoing the thing that the connection of Indianness. That will not be, I don't think, the main contribution Rishi Sunak could be making. Contextually, counting from 1757, Rishi Sunak's entry is significant because it marks the realization of the opposite of what Thomas Babington Macaulay had said in the 1830s. Rishi Sunak is, on the outside, he is Indian, and on the inside, he is British. But he is not British because of any operation, any factor at play that Thomas Babington Macaulay had elaborated on. Rishi Sunak's entry is peaceful, and in a way that is the opposite of what Robert Clive and the East India Company had done. They bribed, they corrupted the country before they took over by corruption and stayed there for 190 years. Whereas Rishi Sunak's entry into number 10 Downing Street is marking the opposite of corruption, because corrupt personification, Boris Johnson, is the one that he's replacing. The lettuce, as the Daily Star, the tabloid newspaper, has described Liz Truss as, the lettuce is comparatively insignificant, even by her own admission. And the main important news about her today has been that she has been partying at the official kind of rural residence of the UK Prime Minister, Chequers. She has been partying. Now, Rishi Sunak, every stage of the way, Rishi Sunak's entry into the number 10 Downing Street has been non-violent. Non-violent, not by intention, not by design, but in fact, there has been no alternative but to pursue non-violence, if you like. This is very significant because of that. And as I have said to a person I was speaking to about 5 minutes ago, this has not happened anywhere, really. Elections or successions to state offices, especially the prime minister or the president, these are followed or preceded by violence and hysteria and all the rest of it. This time here, because of what Boris Johnson had done, there was no room for violence and hysteria, because all the lies that Boris Johnson had perpetrated in his entire political career, began to catch up with him. That is what I read in all of this. And each lie being kind of exposed has become untenable for Boris Johnson to justify or live down. There is no kind of end to the list of lies that Boris Johnson has kind of perpetrated. So much so that all his hype, these whole fantasy personalities that Boris Johnson created about himself, including of course as the original liar, his father Stanley Johnson, shared with the world. That as an infant, as a child, he wanted to be the king of the world. There has never been a position called the king of the world. There cannot be, cannot have been, and that never was. So the fact that this fantasy was cultivated about Johnson and attributed to him by his father showed that the whole origin is fantasy based and untruth based, lies based. As in the Quran, Al Isra, it says the shaitan, Iblis, would have a small number of followers deluded by shaitan. And it is quite clear from the life of lies of Boris Johnson that he is a shaitan. He is a disciple of the shaitan, and he has been deluding people. Now, for example, this 2019, December 2019 UK general election witnessed on the surface the largest number of conservative members of parliament in the majority seen in a long time, in a very long time. And when it came to the last 72, 78 hours or whatever, and the issue became whether Johnson would drop out or stay in the race for the election to the leadership of the Conservative Party, and eventually his wanted return to number 10 Downing Street again, it became clear that Johnson was spinning. Johnson was spinning furiously. He it was that confected each and every line of the propaganda, which was crafted in a way, scripted in a way, phrased in a way, couched in a way that showed that somebody else or a group of other people were speaking on his behalf, praising him, commending him, lauding him, and recommending his return to the number 10 Downing Street, including his father, the liar, the original liar, the original lying Johnson, Stanley Johnson. Stanley Johnson joined the other fantasist, Uri Geller, the Israeli self-confessed bender, spoon bender, iron bender, whatever. He gave a very detailed claim post facto. That is to say, he claimed that days earlier, days before the current election thing or succession thing went into process, he had the inkling, he had the feeling that Johnson would return and he would succeed. The similar lines that the original Johnson, the liar, Stanley Johnson said. Stanley Johnson said that Boris Johnson would succeed and he would get back to number 10 Downing Street as the Prime Minister again. And he said, as if he was cradling this boy on his kind of lap and saying he would do the things that I care about, like do the best things for Europe or what is best for Europe. Now, Stanley Johnson is not only absolutely dishonest, but he's absolutely senile. He lost all contact with facts and evidence. He, therefore, completely forgot that the Brexit nightmare was created by this liar, Boris Johnson, over actively exacerbating the incitement against the idea of UK staying in the European Union. How on earth? This is not logical. This is not factual. And yet, Stanley Johnson, the liar, said that he would do things for Europe, good things that I care about. So, the state of consciousness among the Johnsons has been completely exposed as degenerate literally, depraved and degenerate. I make this statement and I make this series of observations in solidarity with and in identity with the baby angel Geronimo. Baby angel Geronimo has been the witness, the perfect witness to all the crimes and criminality, depravity, corruption, and cruelty personified by the evil Boris Johnson and his cabal. So we are together, baby angel Geronimo and I, as we witness this degeneration of Boris Johnson and the other Johnson, the liars. One of the one of the most sick-making mental servility things witnessed across the UK when the Brenda, in other words, Queen Elizabeth II, passed away, was all the social media posts run by or run in the name of various Asian people, African people, but I'm mainly focusing on the Asian, the Muslim ones. All of these posts posted feelings that they were personally very sad and they were overcome with emotion and sadness. By definition, the emotions of sadness and bereavement cannot happen unless you are directly biologically related to somebody very close. How on earth were these people expressing this while they were at the same time, these Muslims, claiming to be Muslims and praying and believing in God? This was very near perpetrating shirk because they were actually addressing Brenda as a kind of deity. Now, Muslims do not have any deity. They've got La ilaha illallah Muhammad Rasulullah. There is only one. La ilaha, there is no God but God. And they were likening Brenda to God, a deity. And another thing I've noticed is about these conservative members of kind of the community, of the Asian community or the Muslim community. I mean, how do these people manage to do this? On the social media, their posts on Twitter or Facebook or less frequently, less often seen on Instagram, these people manage to get photographed standing next to Liz Truss even. I mean, Liz Truss has not been the figure for longer than a month or a few weeks. And yet these people have posted pictures of themselves standing very close to Liz Truss or like kind of holding Liz Truss very close to them physically. And they're, I mean, these individuals, by the facts and the evidence, are much shorter than Liz Truss. So they look like, literally, they look like clinging onto Liz Truss. Now, what on earth are they clinging to Liz Truss for? And then there is another one by the same individual that I'm not naming because of my own discretion. There is a picture, but there were more pictures than that one. But I spotted one today of this individual standing very near to Boris Johnson. Now, one of the captions, not in the picture that I've seen today, but this one is about congratulating Boris Johnson on his birthday. But another one by the same individual clingingly standing next to Boris Johnson and saying, I am proud of you. Can you believe that? This is an Asian, within quote, Muslim woman saying that she is proud of Boris Johnson. Whatever for? Quite apart from the fact that he is a notorious adulterer and who has got no morality or principles, what on earth could he have done for her that she could say was something she could express publicly pride in him or about him? Of course, he is the same Johnson who, years before that incident, that photograph or that post on the Twitter account, had compared Muslim women wearing burqa, looking like, because of that, because of their wearing the burqas, looking like bank robbers. Was that something this Muslim woman was thinking about when she wrote she was proud of Boris Johnson? There was nothing else that she could be proud of Boris Johnson about, because everything Boris Johnson has done, said, and supported has been racist, and in particular, very, very, very anti Muslim. Where are these people's brains? So they're Muslim by name, but mentally completely beyond even the contemptible stage of degeneration to which Thomas Babington Macaulay had consigned their predecessors. So Boris Johnson is out, and he's out because he has been rejected. Instead of being the source of pride by 80 plus majority MPs in the House of Commons, whose majority was allegedly achieved by him, Boris Johnson, because Boris Johnson had been promoting himself as the winner. He is the winner. And the sick making Norman Smith on the BBC News channel said it 100 times. He's a winner. Now, Boris Johnson has not only been condemned, rejected by those people he apparently helped to win, but he has been completely kind of blanked by the majority, and he has been exposed as a liar, because he said he had the requisite 100 MPs endorsement. The question that other people have raised, other commentators have raised as well, is this: if there were 100 or plus 102, that is the latest number that he gave, members of parliament that endorsed him, what was the mystery? What was the secret for them not publicly confirming that? So same applies to Penny Mordaunt. But Penny Mordaunt has not been a criminal by any comparable kind of criteria as Johnson, but she has also made phantom numbers about the numbers of MPs that supported her. She has said that 90, the latest number that she gave before she dropped out, was that 90 members of parliament endorsed her. Again, the mysterious question, the question about the mystery, but most of them have not publicly come forward, identifying themselves as the endorsers of Penny Mordaunt. Now look at this. This is not an achievement by Rishi Sunak. Remember what I'm saying. I'm saying this on the day, and even before he has been formally coronated and made the prime minister or the leader of the Conservative Party. I'm saying that even if Rishi Sunak goes in, it's not his achievement. It is the disastrous dishonesty, criminality, and lying by Johnson et al. They disintegrated. The entire conservative project has completely disintegrated, become dysfunctional beyond any repair. It should be scrapped and replaced by a functioning, competent, reliable, honest, and relevant and up to date organization that can represent the country and deliver to the society if they believe that this society exists. Now, this is the Khoodeelaar television channel, Baby Angel Geronimo editions, and this is part 2 of the day's editions, and this is part 2 at timed at 14:50 hours GMT on Monday, the 24th of October 2020. This is the third day from the Friday, the 22nd October 2004 anniversary, which is 18 years ago. On Saturday, it was the 22nd of October 2004. On Friday, the 22nd of October 2004, I organized, along with K. Jordan, the first campaign rally in the Greater X Street, London E1, against the role played by the political leadership of the Tower Hamlets, the local council, in inviting, in being complicit with and colluding with the Crossrail project. Now, today, Monday, 24th of October 2022, the Crossrail line from Elizabeth line from Bond Street, they allegedly reportedly started. We should talk more about that, but that has been overhyped by the BBC as usual and others. They have no idea. They don't know. What they know, but they're in denial because, for example, the BBC, in the program that is no longer, the slot that is no longer active, broadcast an interview with me and K. Jordan in the slot called Politics Show. It was broadcast on the Sunday, I think 26th of March 2006. And we summarized the actual opposition or objection to the Crossrail whole plot. So the BBC has got footage, its own footage of talking to us and doing actual documentary about the campaign against the Crossrail hole. As a result of the campaign work that the Khoodeelaar campaign has done, the BBC London News did a number of slots in 2006, and all of those were absolutely solid. Again, there was no violence. There was no need for millions of pounds to be raised to do the campaign. The equivalent quality and contributions came from me. And K. Jordan, because of me, gave hard time and was left with no alternative but to support the campaign for Khoodeelaar campaign against Crossrail Hole, because her job with the Spitalfield Small Business Association meant that if the Crossrail Hole was dug, her job would be made very difficult because the buildings that would be destroyed because of the hole, many of those buildings belong to the Spitalfield Small Business Association. So it was for her, in terms of her professional kind of interest, as well as her personal interest, because she was personally a socially active individual in the way that no other white individual has been. Well, there is no other white individual or non-white individual like Jordan. Well, I'm unique, obviously, but I'm not part of the normal representation, because the normal representation, if you take the ethnicity linked and backgrounds, biological links and backgrounds and similarities, would mean that I would have been a servile person. I would be saying thank you very much and doing grinning and doing the selfies, standing next to the likes of the criminal, personification of evil Boris Johnson, and saying I am proud of him. No way. I am completely independent, have been always independent, and shall always remain independent of creeps and criminals, professional and licensed and unlicensed. As I said, in 1973, I had the option to get a license from the Lincoln Inn as a barrister, to practice as a barrister. So that would have made me now emeritus in many respects, and I would have retired by now as a QC or whatever, or a judge or whatever. But I said no to the option to become a barrister, practicing barrister, because I had this almighty row with the administrator at the time in the Lincoln's Inn, a woman called Barbara Bates. Barbara Bates was a classic racist criminal. She behaved in a way that many years later, this idiot from Oxford University, Professor David Hargreaves, who was employed by the Inner London Education Authority, where I was an active member of the schools committee, which was the most powerful committee of the Inner London Education Authority. David Hargreaves kind of reminded me of her, because her problem with me was not that I didn't speak English. I spoke English even before I physically entered the United Kingdom. I spoke English in the village in Sondarpur, where I grew up. And my mother taught me most of the literacy, etc., etc. Now, so I was uniquely well versed in English, even when I was a child, compared to other people, adults, who didn't know what most of the texts were saying, including the telegraph, the Morse code. The Morse code telegraph, many of the messages that came, nobody else could interpret those, but I could. So Barbara Bates had no idea who I was. She saw me a non European person. That's all she saw me as. That's the racist mistake. So she said things that suggested that what I had written, because I had mainly written communications with her, disputing various stupid things that she was raising. And she, when I went physically to challenge her in the Lincoln's Inn office, she said things like, I should explain this paragraph or that paragraph, which I did. But because she was racistly prejudiced, she either pretended to not hear what I was saying, etc., etc. So I said, if I became a license holder, barrister, then I'd have to deal with this kind of people. Then I would have to, by dealing, I would have to depend on their kind of professional approval for my various professional steps and whatever. So I said, fuck you. I don't depend. My soul is far more important than anything, any benefit physically, materially, that I can get by becoming a license holder, barrister. So I said, fuck off. I walked out of the Lincoln's Inn, and I have been practicing law in practice, not as a licensed law trader, but in practice, in combat. For example, the most important thing that people can identify because it has been so kind of prominent and long ranging and long running, is the Khoodeelaar campaign taking on the House of Commons and House of Lords. What I do and what I've always done is train other people to behave as lawyers. I mean, people who are not lawyers, trained lawyers, but I train them. And the biggest myth about the law, the professional kind of licensed law traders, is that there is some kind of myth about the law. It's not. It's not mythical. It is pure fact and knowledge. And to get the fact and the knowledge together in a strategic way and apply those against the liars on the other side is the trick, is the actual secret. So my name was decided at a conference, a seminar in our house in the village. It doesn't happen. It doesn't happen anywhere. But this happened in my case because my father organized a seminar of scholars who deliberated most of the day on various names for me, because at that stage I didn't have an official name. So what they did, the scholars, was come up with the name Zahir al-Haq. Now Zahir is to publish, to disclose, to bring out into the open. And Al is the conjunctive and Haq is the truth. So one who publishes, brings out the truth is Zahir al-Haq. In the Siloti version of the phonetics, it is Zohirul Haq. So my core name is Zahir al-Haq. Now, later, many years later, my late great grandmother, who, apart from my mother and my aunts, was my teacher, and I'm very fond of my grandmother. She was absolute fountain of knowledge and history and so on. She said to me, well, not me, but she said to my siblings who went from London to the village, and she said that all my siblings, all of us, should have the name Shah. The male ones should have Shah, and the female ones should have a form of Shah, like Shahida. I mean, the female version. Why? Because of the name of our great grandfather, who was the Saint Shah Abdul Ali. Ved Shah. That is his real name. I mean, the Ved Shah was a teacher of the most extensive, comprehensive kind, and he taught so many people, and he was, more importantly, side by side as being a teacher, he was a great traveler. None of the people contemporaries in his time, none of his contemporaries ever traveled as far as he did. He traveled up to the various countries in Central Asia. Now remember, it was more than 100 years ago, and transport was not anything like what it is now. So he and his companions, his pupils and his companions, traveled for years on foot mainly. So they went to Central Asia and other places. So when he came back home, and he kind of stayed there for, I cannot say exact length of time, but he must have stayed for months. And when he came there, people came to know about his coming back home. And who were the people that were interested in that information? It is the people who are themselves suffering from serious ailments and illnesses and their relations. So according to my grandmother, Musammad Tayyibun Nasa, because he was her husband's father. So he was her father-in-law. So she saw as a young woman what he was doing and what he was capable of doing, and he was helping people, how he was helping people. Because she was one of the people who were feeding all the guests that came visiting our house. And these people came in any numbers, my grandmother said to me when I was growing up. She said people like few in number or dozens of people every day. So they were feeding these people, and the people came with all kinds of ailments and complaints. And the Bedshah was a gifted saint. He didn't have any formal kind of clinical medical training. He has the gift, divine gift of blessing people. So my grandmother said, so he would give them blessings and their illnesses would disappear. That's Bedshah's gift, which he shared with these people. And so when this happened, it included people that had been ill and suffering for years and had tried everything known but had not recovered. But when they came in contact with the Bedshah, and he prayed and he gave them his blessings, they healed. So the gratitude, these people are all, every single one of them, were very grateful for the help that he gave. The gratitude was tangible in their minds. So what they wanted to do was to repay him. Like if you go to a doctor, ordinary doctor or similar, you pay them money for their treatment. Now this was beyond treatment. This was a miracle. And they had no words with which to thank him. Bedshah, my great grandfather. So what they did was to do the next best thing. They said, we have this amount of land. Please accept that land as a token of our appreciation. Or we have this amount of money. Please accept this as a token of our appreciation. Or we have something else, material, resource, or wealth. What do you want? Remember, this is Muhammad Haque, great grandson of the Bedshah. So anyone who doesn't understand me, this is the clue as to understanding me. This is a significant leading clue. So he would say, I don't want your land, I don't want your money, I don't want anything. That's it. He didn't say, I'll take it on another day or in future or whatever. He said, no. I gave you what I gave you as a blessing. This is my blessing, my gift. I didn't do it as a trade, as a commerce, as a business. Now, my grandmother interpreted all of that to me. Of course, I never saw him. I never even saw my grandmother's husband, my father's father, because my father's father died before I was born, as far as I can remember. So I only saw my mother's father, but he too died when I was quite young. So my grandmother interpreted that to me as follows. She said that if he had said yes to these people offering their land and money and whatever, or sell the land, then all the land that you could see outside of our house, beyond the fields, all the land that you can see with your naked eyes, he would have more land than your eyes can see. That is the equivalent. Of course, the land didn't belong to the people in the same spot. They came from far and wide. But if those pieces or parcels of land were added together, they would constitute like a whole area. Now that would be in 2022 prices in, let's say, sterling or dollar. It would be equivalent to billions, billions and billions and billions, more than the billions that Elon Musk or Mark Zuckerberg or Bill Gates or any of those has. So this is the power. This is the power of the saint, Ved Shah. Ved is a word that means mystery, secrets. And Shah is a spiritual name for saint. So he was called that by other people. He didn't give himself that name. His name was Shah Abdul Ali. But he was given the name Ved Shah by people grateful for his work and help. So my grandmother said that you are an inheritor. You inherit wealth that could have belonged to you, your family, your generation, but you are better off now without that wealth than you would be if you had that wealth left behind by your great grandfather. And I am absolutely convinced, that that is the case. So when I do the impossible legal tricks and I unravel the opponents, that is what I am doing. I am doing the work that my grandmother said I am destined and born to do, continue the work of Ved Shah. So how do I explain the behavior of all these judges, including the criminal at the Clerkenwell and Shoreditch County Court in 2011? It's a woman called Goodman, Judy the Evil Goodman. She is the daughter of Satan. And I have not even begun to deal with Judy the Evil Satan daughter, Goodman, because literally I have been busy with other things, not unconnected with the things that Judy Goodman actually caused. The huge, the unique intellectual properties that I created before I came to this country, and since I came to this country 50 odd years ago, the intellectual properties I created cannot be measured by any other person's resources or collections or creations. These are continuation of the work of the Ved Shah. What are they? The intellectual properties that I created and authored are nothing but items of the truth of my time. Say, for example, I'll give an example. There is one case of a businessman who is now, a business that is based in Brick Lane. Now, the owner of the business, or the main owner of the business, should have been in prison, where he would have died if he went to prison because he had got other vulnerabilities. Because of my help, he stayed alive and he is doing business, nothing to do with me. He neither offers and nor shall I accept anything he offers. But he's ungrateful. Unlike those people that my great grandfather helped, This one is ungrateful. But that is not the reason I am referring to him. The reason I'm referring to him is how I saved him. Now, I know, licensed law traders of all descriptions, and I have no problem in understanding any legal complexity, whatever. And I shall talk about, I'm not naming this individual because I'm trying to protect her identity. The woman who had the meeting with the criminal crook, the racist, shit, Edward Fitzpatrick, without my consent, without my approval, and so on. And she fucked up my case. She fucked up my case to the extent that she recommended this stupid infant girl, Lucy Green, this fucking lying Lucy Green, insulted my intelligence with the collusion of this individual. And we shall come to that in a separate edition. Now, if I were to depend on, say, somebody like David Pennick, now David Pennick is one of the overly hyped. Now he's a KC because of Brian becoming the king, and the Q becomes the K. David Pennick charged the Manchester Football Association, whatever it was, Manchester City, I think, who, what is called, retained him during their dispute with the European ruling on a football dispute. So Pennick, as a retainer, Pennick charged them at the rate of £20,000 a day, regardless of the result. Now that is the whole thing. You hire or retain a lawyer, barrister or solicitor, whatever, not based on the outcome of their retention, but on the fact that they are retained and they speak or write or whatever, communicate to the third party or parties concerned on your behalf. So he charged them £20,000 a day. And that day is measured from, say, 9 o'clock to 5 o'clock. 8 hours. If I charged anyone at the rate or similar rate as David Pennick, and if I did that on every occasion that I have intervened, I would have been, by now, richer than Rishi Sunak or his father-in-law. But I have not done that. So this boy, the Brick Lane-based business person, would have been in jail with his wife. Now, if he and his wife were in jail, their children would have completely been destroyed. Now, how can you begin to measure the value of saving life and children, etc., etc.? Another family I rescued from India in Bombay. Now, the children are now all grown up and they have no idea just what happened before they got in, because they were not supposed to come to the UK. They were not legal and they had no claim for entry into the UK. So how did I do that? I did that as in other cases. I wrote a letter to the UK, relevant UK diplomatic place that was responsible for the issuing of the visa or whatever. And I made a case. I can't read that actual exact text because I'm not looking at the text. And so therefore, an entire family of 5 or 6 children, whatever, and the wife of the man that approached me here in London were allowed in. How could he begin to pay me? He could not. He never would. And I never asked him to pay me. What I asked him to do is to cover the cost of the communications, like a use of the computer or that kind of thing. Nothing to do with me sitting in a place and enjoying a meal or something. Nothing like that, or buying anything for my luxury or whatever. And this can be multiplied any number of times. I have done that, and I have not done that by sitting the garden chambers in the Lincoln's Inn, the fucking morons, the crooks chamber of fucking barristers. And as I said, I have not begun to deal with Judith Goodman, as I have not even really begun to deal with the Edward Fitzpatrick boy or the rest of the fucking barristers there. They have no idea just how they will disintegrate when I begin on them. So that's what I've been doing. I did this same kind of thing before I formally came into the UK. When I was in East Pakistan, I was publishing and writing as a journalist. I didn't do that for money. I am the only one on the whole face of the earth that wrote serious journalism and did not do that for money. And they could not buy me. So I was doing things like this incident that I've mentioned before. This boy was kind of part of the family. His father was in the UK, and he was on the list of his father's list of dependents, but he was over the age. That is a cutoff date, because over a certain age and you are not any longer counted as a dependent. And this boy was in that category of exceeding the cutoff date. Now, I'm in Dhaka and I come from Silot in the village, and I get a urgent call or a message, or somebody visits me in Dhaka with a desperate plea, please save this boy. So I said, what do I have to do? They said, well, his mother and his younger siblings are all cleared. They've been given visas to go to the UK, join their father. But he cannot go there because he's over the age. If you are watching this boy, don't make a mistake. Don't ever treat this as if I am not remembering what happened. Your mother, if she's still breathing, remembers that. Because she told my sister many times how grateful she was for what I did. So this boy, over the age, no lawyer in the whole of East Pakistan could make him under the age, could they? Nobody could. No amount of money could do that. But I did. And not only did I do that, I went to the airport, got into the airport, and physically walked with this boy and his mother and his siblings to the actual aeroplane in the airport, in order to make sure that they were all together in the plane. And then I watched as the plane flew. What kind of money could do that? What kind of lawyer could do that? But I did that. And, there are other many examples. So this is Bed Shah's great-grandson doing it. Now, they never offered me any money afterwards, and they could not, and I would not want it. So any moron that looks at my behavior and the conduct and wonders what on earth is this guy doing. This is the answer. This is a unique blessing and a contribution that I make for humanity's help. It's not for money. The other thing is that it cannot be done by anyone, quote, professionally licensed. Now, one lawyer boy, a solicitor, I call solicitors soul cheaters. Solicitors, soul cheaters. This boy, now, one of the Tar Hamlet's counselors in the cabal, fronted by the crook Lutfur Rahman, abused my good faith contract with him and said to me that I should approach this particular soul cheater, colleague of his, somewhere in Brick Lane, as an office somewhere in Brick Lane. Again, I'm not naming these criminals for the simple reason that if I name them, some people will really be very angry with them. And I don't want anyone doing the violence against them. Well, I'm naming Lutfur Rahman because he has been frequently named as a fraudster and criminal, and he will remain so named for the rest of his life. Now, this idiot boy who the other one sent me to said to me something absolutely unbelievable. I didn't need the advice. I couldn't need the advice. And to the woman who accompanied me to the Clerkenwell and Shoreditch County Court the first day, when the hearing was heard by a deputy judge who was the exceptional rarity, who actually gave the ruling in my favor against the Tar Hamlets community housing, that woman was looking at me as I was checking the legal textbook. And I remember this woman looking scathingly, as if I was a novice. Now, if this woman wants to face challenge me, I will take on her challenge. And by the time the contest is finished, she will be in tears. That is the least she will be in. And all other things that I could do to her for her lying, her racist lying, I'm not listing here. Okay? So all these cases that I have been carrying out are beyond measure in material terms. So this stupid boy completely misunderstood me and treated me as another, quote, another member of the community. For whatever reason, I don't think he should have done that, but he did do that. Probably because, like the criminal Indian Gujarati C.B. Patel, he thought that I was in his kind of premises, so he could abuse me. Like most of the drivers abuse passengers in their vehicles by not driving carefully or not stopping when the passenger wants them to stop the stupid fucking vehicle. So this boy said to me, he said, my fee is 250 pounds per hour. Now, if I actually showed my real personality, I would have literally smashed the table in front of him. And I'd have put the table or a leg of the table into right through his fucking whatever. That shit boy showed the kind of quality, lack of quality that made up the individuals, that made up the crew that the crooked Lutfur Rahman was a part of and was depending on. I said yesterday how Lutfur Rahman, I filmed him on the 29th of October 2010, and how Lutfur Rahman almost entered the Clifton business office, and how I stopped them, not by shouting, but just by being there. And they knew I was watching and filming them, the criminals. So, how many crimes do I kind of count that I'm stopping from happening? I could not stop the crime of having an elected mayor post inflicted because it didn't depend on individual, one person kind of intervention. It was completely messed up by the need for votes. And the morons that voted for the elected mayor system brought on that scandal and the disgrace and the criminality and the fraud and the corruption and the dishonesty. So I left that idiot boy's office, but I have not forgotten a single bit of what happened. And this is the crucial bit that I've just shared on the record. Now, Lutfur Rahman was introduced to me as a child while he was a teenage boy. As I was standing at the entrance of what is known as the BDC, Business Development Center, sometime in 1980. And this boy, if he was born in the 1960s, that in the 70s he would have been 10, he could not be older than 15, 16 at the most. And he was introduced to me by 2 or 3 of my ex-pupils that are political pupils, social pupils that I introduced to enlightenment, that their forefathers and the entire ancestry put together would never be able to even remember or understand. But those ex-pupils, with 1 or 2 exceptions, have forgotten what I taught them, and they have sold their soul, and they have been behaving like mental slaves and nephew toms and whatever since I abandoned the criminals. And they went to the influence of a British security spying operation run by a criminal called John Newbegins. Any spy girl watching this should note that and go to her masters or mistresses to find out who John Newbegins was. John Newbegins began his operation to sabotage my work in defense of the community from a base in Brick Lane. So this boy, Lutfur Rahman, was introduced to me sometime in 1980. And he was all kind of, as Richard Morey has noted in his comments about his personality, appearance. I mean, he puts on a personality appearance of not being offensive, but he is very dishonest. That is what Morey said about Lutfur Rahman. He's very dishonest. He's absolutely dishonest, poisonously dishonest. So at that age, he was a teenager, whatever the age, actual age, and I never saw him again until sometime in the early 1990s. And he spotted me and gave me a typical salute as I was coming out of the Aldgate East by the eastern exit. And he gave me a salute. And I said, what are you doing? And he said he was a solicitor. Now remember, that was the early part of the 1990s. And I'm giving chapter and verse about the lies that he told. He said he was a solicitor. He gave me a card. Now the card had his name as well as the name of a firm of solicitors. So I took it in good faith and I said, well, I said, what are you doing? He said, hey, he's a solicitor. That was in the early part of the 1990s in the Aldgate East station. It so happened not long after that this child, 11-year-old girl, Nasima Begum, this 11-year-old girl, Nasima Begum, was killed by the negligence of the London Ambulance Service on the one hand, and the pediatric ward of the Royal London Hospital in Whitechapel. Now, as is the case, I mean, Nasima's father knew me as an organizer of the community defense. I'm talking about the early 1990s, 93, 94. And he stopped me. And then, in order to hear what he had to say, I arranged to sit down with him somewhere. And then he said, tearfully said about how he lost his child. Now, independently, separately from his approaching me, I had on that same day or during that same week read in the Evening Standard the short account of what the London Hospital and the ambulance had done. That's all. There was no statement on behalf of the family or the father of the child. So I sat down with them in their house, which is a council building in the Christian Street. And after the discussion, they agreed that I should start the campaign. I did start the campaign. Here is the secret about the lawyers, licensed law traders again. Now, at that time, there was a white woman solicitor apparently dealing with them, their case. Now, the history of the UK, these quangos and the inquiries, etc., the public bodies like the Charity Commission and all the other things, the history, the facts show that these are bogus. And my encounter with these institutions and agencies, the individuals, is consistent with my belief that they are couriers of Satan, the couriers and agents of Satan. This is how I saw the Crossrail morons, and I had long discussions with Kay Jordan. And she readily understood my analysis, and she absolutely was convinced correctly, and we succeeded. I described the Crossrail liars as organizing in the propaganda like endless mirrors. They were creating mirages and they're creating images, serial images, to befuddle and mislead people. Like today's opening of the Elizabeth line shit. They say that it was a huge achievement. It is not. I'll come to discussing the Crossrail in the next few weeks because it's a long, detailed, complex, factual account that I have to make in order to make it clear to anyone viewing this, watching this. In the Clerkenwell and Shoreditch County Court, I had how many appearances did I have about the lies of Tar Hamlets community housing perpetrated along with the Tar Hamlets Council crooks. How many? About 4 or 5. Other attempts, applications that I made were sabotaged by the lying court administration and the court cabal of judges who knew that they couldn't answer my challenges, so therefore they refused me hearings. Now, my claim against the behavior of this racist criminal Satan, Judith Goodman, that was sabotaged by Edward Fitzpatrick, it starts with the Article 6 claim that I did not get a fair hearing. Why did I not get a fair hearing against the crooks of Tar Hamlets community housing? Is because Edward Fitzpatrick fucked up the whole proceeding by calling me as a witness. The fucker never told me that he would call me as a witness. Because if he had said to me that he would call me as a witness, I would have said a defiant no. Not because I didn't have enough truth to say, but because the racist, stupid, ignorant, illegal environment in the courtroom would have fucked up any truth telling, as it happened on that occasion. There is a barrister boy that I will be catching hold of, this fucker Alan Lane, who appeared on behalf of the fucking Tar Hamlets community housing crooks. And that stupid boy insulted my intelligence by appearing to be smartly quizzing me about my statement about the Tar Hamlets Law Center. Now, the fucker doesn't know or didn't know that I created the Tar Hamlets Law Center as a founding member. And the reason I did not become an active committee member of the Tar Hamlets Law Center was because it was taken over by too many mental slaves and crooks. So when Edward Fitzpatrick called me as a witness, he did that on the supposed permission given illegally at my expense by somebody else who appeared with Lucy Green at Edward Fitzpatrick's chambers before I arrived there. That was a wholly illegal thing altogether. When I later condemned them and called them names, that individual criticized me. I'm putting it on the record. You have not heard from me. If you hear from me, you will not exist. You will perish. You liar. You lied. Who is that? Who? Hold on. I'm not looking at the clock, so I can't see what the time is, you know.
There you go. Here's the spoon. Good one.
Thank
There
you.
you
Thank you, Mark.
go. No worries.
So this will be the unexpected end of this particular edition. The whole thing will be continued in due course. So I'm finishing this after the broadcast has been 1 hour and 15 minutes and 18 seconds.